All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening or good morning, depending upon where you are. This is Dr. Patrick Lockwood coming back to you today to discuss relationships. I've been talking now for a couple months and trying to help everyone understand wellness to the best of my ability based upon, what the science says and what my experience is as a clinician and what the evidence says in terms of what works for developing a lifestyle of wellness. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of things are very important to wellness. Things like meditating, eating right, sleeping right, developing healthy friendships, and other self-care things, having an engaged mind, things of that nature. These are all good for wellness. But one thing that's important in a big way for a lifestyle of wellness is healthy relationships. Healthy relationships with family, friends, lovers, romantic partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives. These relationships are a huge part of how we all survive and get along in the world. And I wanted to talk today about what we need to do whenever we're struggling in a relationship, because as I'll talk about in a little bit, the general truth of the matter is there's no such thing as a perfect relationship. Every relationship goes through struggles. Every relationship goes through ups and downs. And that's normal. It's abnormal if your relationship is totally fine all the time and everything is going well all the time. Because again, we're human, we're alive, we have differing thoughts and feelings and opinions about things. We therefore, hey Timothy, glad you came by. Thanks, Michael. I hope you're doing well, both of you. Look forward to talking with you both soon. We're talking about relationships and the importance of what do we do whenever things are not going well in a relationship? What happens when things go badly? How do we deal with that? Because oftentimes I think, watching movies or television shows for the last 50 years, you'll find that a lot of these shows and movies and books and everything paint relationships as these things that should be going consistently well. And that's just not true. I think based upon my experience as a clinician, as a doctor, as well as just my life experience and everyone I know, there's a normal amount of up and down that we should all go through in our relationships. And in the world of psychology, psychoanalysis, things like that, we talk about it in terms of something called rupture and repair. So I want to talk about this rupture and repair thing, and I want to talk about how we can more smoothly go through a rupture moment and repair our relationships. Because, again, the common myths in many cultures, and in the US in particular, is that things should be rosy all the time. If we're dating someone, if we're married to someone, if we're best friends, if we're family members, everything should be fine. We should perfectly love each other and perfectly accept each other, which is just not true, honestly. Not that I'm promoting that we should dislike each other and not accept each other, but it's totally unreasonable to think that every moment of every day in our relationships, we absolutely love and adore everything about everyone. It's very, very normal, statistically speaking, to actually have many moments of rupture and hopefully many moments of repair. But I want to talk about the rupture side, and I want to talk about how that happens, how that works, and then how we can repair it. Okay? So again, the point of this video is to talk about in therapy what's called rupture and repair, because every relationship, good or bad, should be going through ruptures and repairs. And what's really important is how we repair, and then how bad the rupture is in the first place. So I want to talk a little bit about, generally speaking, what I mean by rupture and repair. So when I say rupture in relationships, I'm talking about thanks Jason, appreciate it. When I say rupture, I'm talking about every moment in a relationship where we are misattuned to, okay? So in any relationship, in any moment, we definitely experience things where We're fully attuned to each other, we're present, we're mindfully present, we're emotionally present, and we're paying attention, and we're engaged with the other person. And then what happens is, because of our own thoughts, because of something that someone says, because of information, social media, whatever is on in our lives, we will be distracted from being fully present with people. And every time we are disconnected from, that is what we call a misattunement. Okay, so every time that we're in a conversation with someone and then all of a sudden they're not paying attention to you, or they're looking at their phone, which is probably pretty common nowadays, or they interrupt you, or what have you, that's what we call in the psychoanalytic world a misattunement. And every misattunement can be perceived as a rupture, because ruptures essentially are a breaking of the bond in that moment. And from the moment we're born to the moment that we die, we are going to be experiencing ruptures where we are attempting to be connected to someone, and then all of a sudden, either we or the other person, or both, will become disconnected. That's a rupture. So ruptures can be little things like not paying attention in the middle of conversation, or they can be bigger things like having a fight over any number of things, having a fight about politics, having a fight about, issues, finances, things like that, having a fight about affairs, all sorts of things that we can get engaged in ruptures with. Because ruptures can be very small, little things, like not paying attention, breaking eye contact when something meaningful is going on, or they can be bigger things like big fights, big blowouts, things like that. So if you look at how we are born and how we develop, a little baby is very, very helpless, and the one thing it needs is consistent attunement. So what parents do, if you ever watch little babies or if you have little kids, you notice that when that little baby is born, for the first couple of years of life, everyone is all about that baby. Everyone pays so much attention to that child all the time. And that's for good reason. Our evolutionary instinct, in terms of the infant, says, seek out attention as much as possible so that I can get attuned to, so that I can learn, so that I can grow, and so that I can be safe and be emotionally regulated. So this desire for attunement that we all have from the moment we're born to the moment we die is actually one way that we regulate our brain and one way that we regulate our feelings. So when we have ruptures, whether they're very small or very big, it actually affects our ability to feel grounded, to feel safe, and feel connected with each other, which leads to a sense of insecurity, which can lead to anger and anxiety and all sorts of other things that lead us to argue, fight, promote long distance, and become cold and unfeeling. All sorts of different ways we cope with when we are misattuned to or there is a rupture. And I want to talk briefly about the neuroscience of ruptures and repairs. So all humans, and most mammals, and even a few reptiles, actually are built to attune to the environment around them and seek out attunement and connection with people through things like our right orbital frontal cortex and certain parts within it that are very, very important for sensing faces, sensing tone of voice, sensing affect, how our face looks, and our emotions, and sensing the presence, the emotional presence of connection. Little babies are highly, highly sensitive at this time, in the first 2 years of life, seeking out all sorts of information to grow and attune this area, and depending upon how that happens, we attach a certain way. We develop an attachment style, which will then determine our sensitivity to different kinds of relationship ruptures and determine our repair needs. So we are biologically hardwired to want to be attuned. We're biologically hardwired to want to feel regulated by being attuned to. That's a good half of how we feel regulated throughout the day is in our relationships, whether it's bosses, family, friends, lovers, romantic partners, whatever. So if you think about your daily life, you're probably misattuned to, or you experience small ruptures dozens of times a day. Not because you've necessarily done anything bad or not because they're necessarily bad people, but again, because we're imperfect and we're human, we struggle to be fully empathically present. That's just how it is. We've got our fears, we've got our emotional struggles, we've got our traumas. These keep us from being fully present. Outside of relationship dynamics that keep us from being present. So that's what a rupture basically is. It is a misattunement. It is a disconnecting of the right orbitofrontal cortex and other areas like that in our insular cortex that helps us feel disconnected and makes us feel alone, and then also causes emotional dysregulation. Because again, part of how we feel emotionally regulated is through relationships. It's actually a big part. It's how we develop in the first 2 years of life. It's how we basically feel safe in the first 2 years of life. And just because now we're older and we have fancy language and we can move a little better doesn't mean we still don't need that. In fact, we still need much of that. And because life is more challenging and more complex, we actually need more attunement because that's what's required to be healthy. So relationships are a big deal. Rupture is a big deal. And when I was preparing this, I looked through the couples therapy research and the psychology research, the psychiatry research, and all that stuff. And what I found was pretty much all articles I could find said that one of the main points of therapy, as what I do on a weekly basis, is actually working through little misattunements or ruptures and trying to repair them appropriately based upon the person's attachment dynamics and personality and culture and things like that. So if it works for therapy, it must be something very important for regular old relationships, not just professional therapy relationships. So all the evidence shows one of the main things we need in life is a healthy way to repair any rupture that occurs. Okay? So I hope that's clear. I hope that makes sense so far. So we can experience a rupture in the smallest way and in a big way. And the small ruptures usually kind of coagulate and turn into big ruptures at some point if we don't talk about them and try and repair them. So let's talk about the repair side of things. So the repair side of things is actually seemingly deceptively simple. So let's just take, for example, the most common kind of rupture that we have with family and friends and lovers and partners is we get in a fight over something. Okay? So Timothy's asking, what if the rupture was a caught off guard breakup? Okay, that's a good question, and I'll talk about that. I mean, certain kinds of ruptures require different kinds of repairs. Some kinds of repairs may be more one-sided. Other kinds of repairs may be just adopting an acceptance about the fact that the relationship is over. Maybe that relationship is not good for either of you, and maybe that's why it ended. But part of the repair process, as I'm about to discuss, is actually understanding really what's going on. You know, that's really a big part of being able to repair a relationship, a rupture in a relationship appropriately, is to actually fully understand. Because anytime there's a rupture, we have our automatic assumptions about why there was a rupture, but we don't necessarily know the whole truth. We actually have to seek out the whole truth in order to be able to repair it appropriately. And some ruptures are just not repairable. That's an unfortunate fact, but some things are just not repairable because of the circumstances, and that's complex. So here's a simpler, deceptively simple formula for repairing a rupture. And again, let's use the prototypical example of a fight about something with someone you're dating. So my acronym for repair is called POINT. P-O-I-N-T. So it stands for pause, observe, interpret, negotiate, and try. Try again. POINT. So pause just means as soon as you've had a fight, or if you're in the middle of a fight, you need to take a break because you're all emotionally hijacked, and there's no way, if you're emotionally hijacked, to really get the truth and really be able to negotiate in a mindful, loving way. So we need to take a break. We need to take 30 seconds or a minute to just chill out. Or if the fight's just over, take a little space, chill out, do your own thing, then come back. The second thing is observe. We need to observe what's going on within us. Are we feeling angry? Are we feeling frustrated, anxious, confused, concerned? Are we feeling separated from, distant from? What are those feelings, right? That's the second thing. We just need to observe how we feel, because it's about us, not the other person at this point. The third thing for point is interpret. We need to interpret our feelings. We need to understand where they're coming from. So we just had a fight about finances. Okay, so I'm anxious about the fact that we don't have enough money for X, Y, and Z thing. What else is that about? Okay, so is there something about my work situation that is making me anxious too? Is there something about the other person's work situation? Is there something about how we both budget and spend money? Like, what else is going on there? So the I even point is interpret, trying to add detail, understanding, context, and layers. So once you've done your part, you've paused, you've observed your feelings, you've tried to interpret what's really going on, try and understand and make sense of things. The next thing is negotiate. So I'm a businessman first, so the real important part of any relationship, whether it's professional or personal, is negotiating. And negotiation is a collaborative process, which means this is where I'm at, this is my bargaining position, and then where are you at, what's your bargaining position? Very simple, but very difficult to do because we're so hijacked by our feelings. So when it comes to the negotiating phase, the important thing is to clearly state where you're at. So I am anxious about our finances. I was angry because I was anxious, because I was afraid. And it's very, very important for me to understand what's going on with our finances so that we can budget more appropriately and have an easier time living our life on a limited budget, right? As the example I'm using. So that's your starting position. And then you ask them, so where are you at? What's really going on with you? Are you struggling with wanting to spend money? Do you have enough money? Etc., that kind of thing. And be interested in their feelings too, because part of this negotiation process is actually understanding where they're coming from as well. So that's the negotiate side. So once you've fully understood yourself and tried your best to understand theirs, their side, their opinion, their perspective, their feelings, then what we need to do is we need to try again. So if we can attempt to have a conversation again about whatever topic caused the rupture, the best thing we can do is go, okay, so how do we try this differently? What do we do differently now that we know where we're really at, right? So that's point. This is the simple way to try and repair a rupture. Now, it can get tricky depending upon different circumstances. So Timothy commented here and said, what if the rupture was a caught-off-guard breakup? All of a sudden we're broken up, right? So it's really imperative to figure out if you're okay with the breakup, if the relationship really meant something to you. Is it a longer-term relationship? Is it a short-term relationship? Did you really want to pursue it? That kind of thing. And figure out more about that. And figure out where they're really at, if they're willing to talk. If someone's not willing to talk, if they're not willing to negotiate, which is the end point, then there's nothing you can do. Because you cannot convince someone else to negotiate when they want to be disconnected, right? So we're operating on the premise that the people that we're doing the rupture and repair thing with really want to negotiate and really want to try and repair things with you. And in our more intimate relationships, there's really generally a drive to want to repair things because, again, we need connection. We're biologically hardwired to want connection. So that's point. Pause, observe our feelings, and we want to interpret our feelings. So where do they come from? What am I thinking? What else is going on? What's the context? And then we want to negotiate with the other person. This is my starting position. This is your starting position. And then we want to try again. We want to try again because, again, all relationships require effort. They require being able to put effort into repairing and trying things differently. That's the key thing, is that we have to try and repair the rupture differently. Because most of the time we have very, very patterned ways of fighting and breaking up and distance and enmeshment and all that stuff. But we're not doing anything different. We're doing the same thing. So we need to try and find a new way to repair the rupture and live the relationship differently. So that's part of the negotiate and try part. So I'm glad that helped, Timothy. I'm glad that works, and we can talk more about that if you want. But that's point. So that's rupture and repair. I hope that's clear. I know this one went a little bit longer than usual. I try and stay around 15 minutes. But again, this is kind of an important topic, and there's so much to say. I could talk for hours about the neuroscience of being attuned to and feeling connected, and the importance of being attuned to and not feeling like there's a rupture in the moment. And again, we have misattunements and ruptures that are very, very small, like breaking eye contact and things like that, that may not be very vexing. But then we have very big ruptures when we fight, when we get in big arguments, when we have affairs, when we break up, things like that, or have fights with family, or whatever it is. And all these different shades of gray in terms of intensity ruptures are important for us to address, because the more we address them, the better our relationships go, which is what all the research I'm going to post on the Patreon here in a minute shows. Without a doubt, without fail, therapy always goes better, always produces better outcomes when there's an active focus on repairing ruptures. And relationships always go better. Children develop healthier when we teach them how to repair ruptures, when we help them understand the misattunements and repair them. So I've given you the science of ruptures, the science of repair, which is trying things differently, trying to see the other person where they're at and attune to where they're really at in the negotiating phase, and then trying things differently at that point. So point, pause, chill out, observe, interpret, which is try and understand where you're coming from, what's your feeling, negotiate, which is state where you're coming from, what you're feeling, what's going on with you, and then ask them where they are coming from, what they're feeling, what's bugging them, what's concerning them. Go as deep as you can in the negotiation, and then try it again, which means trying it differently, trying the conversation differently, fixing the behavior differently, attuning to each other differently. These are all important parts of the try part. So I appreciate you all coming out. I will post the link to Patreon here in a couple of minutes with all the research and the science. You can look at it for yourself and see if I misled you or if I missed anything. And feel free to ask questions, comment, things like that, and I'm happy to answer and talk more about this stuff. I really appreciate you coming out. The book is coming out soon, about a month and a half. And I hope you all have a great day. I hope you have a good day of wellness, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, relationships, family, social life, all these things. And I will talk to you very soon more about wellness, relationships, neuroscience, and attachment. Have a good day.